iCoach podcast. This is your host, Marvin Nash. I want to start today's show a little differently than I have in the past. I want to start with a quote that I remember being said to me at some point in my life, and it has resonated for 40 years. And it's this: if you're afraid of failure, you don't deserve to be successful. And so when you really chop that down, what does that mean exactly? If you're afraid of failure, you don't deserve to be successful. I think as people, we have this innate fear of failing and failing in front of our peers. We think there's some sort of embarrassment for going out and not being successful at every single thing we do. One of the things that has really stuck out to me in my career is that I've always gone out on a limb. I've always just given it a shot to see what happens, and I've not always been successful. I know for me in high school, in college, playing football, I always played defense. So when I entered the coaching ranks, naturally I wanted to be a defensive coach. That wasn't in the cards. That wasn't what the coaching staff needed at the time, and I was placed on the offensive side. And, if you had told me 15 years ago that I would be the offensive coordinator of 3 different programs who averaged over 42 points a game, I would have told you you're a liar, because I never understood offense. But I faced my fears and went for it. I think about even now doing a podcast, how afraid I am of public speaking, or how afraid I was, at least, because I had a speech impediment my entire life. I couldn't speak properly. I had years of therapy learning how to talk. And so what's the scariest thing you can do? Record yourself and hear yourself play back. Talk in front of a crowd, speak at public events. And I do that all the time now. I'm facing my fears. And the biggest thing, I think, is just taking a chance in your career and seeing where it takes you. You don't always take every chance, because not every door is for you. But if an opportunity presents itself and it could be good for you, why not go for it? Why not take that shot? So facing your fears has been something that I've lived with, and I've taken my share of losses, but I've also won tremendously. At the end of the day, I wouldn't change anything. So if I can just give words of encouragement to young coaches out there, or to young people in general, don't be afraid to fail. I mean, failure is just part of the process of winning. If you do everything and you're always successful, then you're not challenging yourself. If you're in a room right now and you're the smartest person in the room, get out of that room. You're in the wrong room. You need to be trying to elevate everywhere you're at, trying to grow at every opportunity you can. Thank you very much. This is Coach Nash with the iCoach podcast. Welcome back. This is the iCoach podcast. This is your host, Marvin Nash. I'm joined by Michael Roach. I want to say coach, because you're always out there in the midst of our football teams and doing some amazing reporting. But Mike Roach has done some great things with 24/7 Sports as the lead recruiting director for 24/7. Mike, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm the recruiting editor for Horns 24/7, so I cover the University of Texas and its recruits. But in that capacity, I only feel there's one real way to do this job, and that's by getting out and being seen and seeing as many kids as possible. And so, in that capacity, I tend to make relationships with kids who aren't necessarily going to Texas, and so I end up kind of covering the whole state as it is. But my focus is really on who Texas is recruiting. But I want to really, the part of my job I love is really seeing all these kids win and get to college and become big time players and hopefully big time students and things like that, and be able to go on. And I tell kids all the time, it's everybody wants the Alabama offer. They want the big prestigious offers, but I tell them the goal is to get college paid for. Everything after that is a bonus. You can choose what you want to do for the rest of your life after you get that degree. And if your parents don't got to pay for it, that's the best part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that's echoed by millions of high school coaches around the nation. So many people look to the logo that's on the shirt or on the hat, and not so much the value of the education that they're getting. Tell me this, Mike, how did you get into this business? What made you so interested in the recruiting aspect?
It really goes back to a love I have for Texas high school football. And, I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Irving, Texas, went to Irving High School. What we had some good football teams my time that I was there. We had some dudes that played big time football. And, I've always kind of been interested in the player acquisition aspect of sports, whether it be the draft or, for college, it was recruiting. And I recall, um, you know, I think it was, if there are any Texas fans listening, they're going to shudder when I say this name. It was Ryan Perrilloux, and he was a quarterback out of Louisiana. And all I heard, and I never really, up until that point, really thought much about how colleges got their players, right? I was just like, they show up and they play, and I don't know that I know who they are until they get on the field in college. And I was hearing all this stuff about like, hey, who's going to be next after Vince Young? It's going to be this Ryan Perrilloux guy, and that's kind of how I got into reading like sites like Rivals.com, I've just kind of fell in love with it, with the process. I think recruiting it's an insane business, and it's if you're covering it, if you're recruiting as a coach, if you're a recruiting coordinator like yourself, it is a 24/7, 365-day grind. It never stops. And much to my wife's chagrin, she understands that even when I'm on vacation, I may have to duck out and take a phone call or something. So I kind of love that aspect of it. But really, what I wanted to, my dad used to take me to games when I was little, and growing up in the Dallas area, Old Texas Stadium would host, a 3 or 4 game, schedule on playoff weekends. And we would just go. We would go at 9 a.m. or whatever and get there for the early game, and we would stay all the way through. And I fell in love with Texas high school football. And my goal when I got older and I was unhappy doing what I was doing. I was just working a regular corporate job, and I'd written a little bit in high school, but I hadn't gone to college. I hadn't finished college, and so I didn't think that there was anything else for me. But I told my wife I want to write, and she said, "Well, you can write. You don't have to wait for somebody to hire you. You can just write if you want to write." And so I kind of started doing it on my own. And my goal was, how can I get paid to watch Texas high school football? For a job. And so I came up kind of doing it, blogging on my own, and then got picked up by an independent site. And I worked for 3 years for free, traveling on my own dime around to go see people, build relationships with coaches and players and all sorts of things. And then, 24/7 hired me, and they paid me a very little bit of money, just as a freelancer to kind of come do some stuff for them. And it's just been a process, man. I would kind of almost compare it to what college coaches go through when they, when you take the GA route, and then you're basically doing it for nothing but the love of what you want to do, and you're working your way all the way up. And fortunately, I've gotten to where I've been. A little bit of luck, and I think a lot of hard work has got me there. And now I get to do what I want. I get to wake up every day, and all I think about is high school football.
And that's the dream. That's the dream job right there. I think I look at it the same way. You mentioned the GA route and working your way up through the ranks, and I've seen you do that. I followed you for quite a while, and you're such a talented writer. I can almost see the players when you're describing their skill sets and their assets. And I'm like, this is very very impressive. I guess the next thing I want to ask you, Mike, is how has recruiting changed since you first got in to right now?
It's such a weird thing because it literally evolves by the day, by the week, by the month. It's constantly a changing process. And I'll tell you, I'm going to start with where it was and where it is, and I'll tell you where it's going. Um, when I first started following recruiting, the reason sites like Rivals and to an extent later 24/7 was so popular were because they were the only ones who had access to these players. They would literally report the news. And it's funny, talking to some of the older guys who have worked in the business forever on the beat. It We've got it. I've got it pretty easy. And a big reason for that is social media. These kids throw it out there. I mean, I don't have to go fishing for it. They put it out there for you. And so I think that that's kind of the biggest change, to hear those guys talk about back in the day having a junior day and just having to call every kid and be like, were you at junior day?
Oh my gosh.
It sounds awful. Or did you get an offer? Think about it. Before social media, how did you know a kid got an offer? You didn't. And so I think social media has changed it so much. It's allowed the kids to take their marketing and put it in their own hands. And we don't. It's hard. It's very rare that we break stories in recruiting anymore because the kids are breaking them themselves. I can think of one commitment off the top of my head that I was able to put like breaking. I am telling you this is happening, and I am the first person telling you this is happening. And it was Tavondre Sweat, who's at Texas now, and he was like Tavondre just didn't care for social media, wasn't part of that. And I was looking at his Twitter one day and it just said Texas commit in the bio. And I sent him a text. I was like, Tavondre, did you commit to Texas? And he said, yeah. And I said, are you going to put it out? He goes, no. And I was like, can I report it? And I'm like, he was like, sure. So that's the one breaking story we've ever got to break on as far as a commitment. So we don't get to break them anymore. My job is to, the way I see it, kind of paint the picture. A kid is, we want to be as detailed as possible. This is why a kid might choose Texas. These are the things in his favor. These are the schools they're going against. These are, the reasons. This is the latest buzz I'm hearing from people around it, from his coaches, from him, from his trainers, all those sorts of things. And we just want to tell the kid's story. And I have to tell kids that all the time because I think, unfortunately, there's an aspect of our business where there are guys who work in roles where they are just like, I grew up a fan of the Texas Longhorns. It's true. You can see in my camera here, right there is a Texas hat sitting on my shelf. But I don't ever let that come off in my reporting. I don't think most kids would tell you that they don't know that about me. And it's something that I've really had to put behind me. Like, I'm not as big of a fan anymore because you see how the sausage gets made, and it kind of changes your perception of things. But there is an element in our business of guys who have become basically an extension of the university and are doing my job so that they can recruit kids to that school. And I just won't do that. That's not part of what it is. So like the first conversation I typically have with a kid is, I don't care where you go to school. So just know that right off the bat. I've got problems of my own. I've got a mortgage I've got to pay. I'm not worried about where you're going to school. And I think that usually kind of puts them at ease. So, my goal is, I just want to tell their stories. I'm not here to work for the university. I'm not here to tell their secrets to college coaches. I'm here for them so that when they get to college, everybody knows who they are. And when they make a big play on the field, there are guys who are attached to those kids because they've been following their recruitments for 2 or 3 years. And that's one of the coolest things about our job is like, I'm kind of now, so I started like in 2014 kind of doing it. And I'm now to the point where like that first class got drafted almost in full last year. And in the next like 2 or 3 years, there are going to be kids going in the top 10 of the NFL that I'll be like, I knew that kid when he was a freshman. Like I knew Jeff Okuda when he was a freshman in high school. So it kind of already happened last year. And so that part's like, oh, the draft night's my favorite night of the year because I just get to sit there and cheer for these kids who have made it all the way through. I'm sorry, I'll get off track a lot. So if you got to steer me back, let me know. So that's kind of what's changed so much about it is social media. And Twitter has been the domineering part of social media, but I think it's moving. It's moving a lot now. It's headed towards Instagram, which I fear because I just don't know Instagram as well. Instagram is not as friendly of a platform for breaking news and things like that. And it's also headed towards like TikTok and stuff like that. So, not that I can do any of the dances or anything, but like I know all these weird things. And my wife is like, how do you know that? And I'm like, I have to stay in touch with what like 15 and 16-year-olds are doing. So yes, I do know what the hot TikTok dances are and stuff. The number one receiver in the country, Evan Stewart out of Frisco Liberty, is a megastar on TikTok. He has over 1 million followers. So yeah, I've got to keep in touch with what Evan is doing. And so through that, she's like, you spend way too much time on TikTok. But I think kind of that's where it's going is kids even more controlling their marketing. For years, they've gone to people to shoot videos for them and do edits. Kids are taking that stuff into their own hands now. They're really shutting everybody out of the process and being able to control it as much as you can by themselves.
I've noticed that. And it's funny that you mentioned TikTok. I made my first TikTok last week, actually. And just giving some recruiting facts and using the trending songs and everything like that. And it's funny how we have to meet the kids where they are to keep evolving with the process. I know we have a ton of recruiting coordinators who will be tuned into this. Let's talk a little bit more about, vibing with the kids, being able to connect with where they are. Like, how can we help our kids get noticed by you guys at Horns 24/7 and other beat writers?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you first thing is what not to do. What
Yes.
not to do is, at least with me, and maybe other guys are different, but the presentation is everything, right? So you won't believe how many guys I get, and it's not as much Texas high school coaches as it is trainers or parents that I'll get a DM or an email, and it starts off with, "You have no clue what you're doing. You're sleeping on all these kids," and so they start off insulting me, and I just don't want to read anything past that. So they've already turned themselves off to me. I tell people all the time, you don't have to act out to notice your kids. Reach out to me, build a relationship with me. I think anybody in this state would tell you that if you reach out to me, I have never just ignored a coach or just said, "Coach, I'm not dealing with you." Like, my goal, and like when I started Twitter, I was like, I'm dead set on any Texas high school coach that follows me, I will follow them back. And I don't know, so it's getting harder now. I've got like 24,000 followers. So like when I get a new follow, I don't always see it. It's getting harder to do that, but I try to do that. And I'm open to, if a school invites me and I can make it work, I will be there. I will come out and make it happen. Even if there's not necessarily a kid that's Texas, that's being recruited by Texas out there. I will always try to make it happen, because to me, building relationships is the biggest part of this game. Um, you know, I know that I know you're close, and he's kind of the godfather of the recruiting coordinator position in Texas. DJ Mann was the first contact I ever made in this business on the coaching side. And I can't tell you how far that has carried me and helped serve me down the road, because DJ knows everybody and he knows so much about recruiting that he's able to help me out with so many things. I'm so excited for him in his new role as head coach back at his old high school. But like, I built that relationship with him out of nothing. And, it's kind of got me to where it is. And now even I'll call DJ and say, "I got a kid at this school. I don't know who the recruiting coordinator is. Can you hook me up?" And he's probably in that giant group text you're all in. So,
Yes.
so he's always helpful with that. Man, I would say just reach out to me is the biggest thing. Don't, and here's the other thing: be realistic about your kids. There's nothing wrong with a D2 offer. There's nothing wrong with a 1AA offer. The biggest thing I hate, and it really turns me off, is I'll get a call and it'll be like, "I have the next Trevor Lawrence. I have the next Chase Young. I have and these are all real names. I am telling you that I have been told in the last months. I have the next this person." And look, man, they don't make like more than one of those guys. There are no more Chase Youngs. That dude was a one of a kind off the line. They don't make any more of him. He's a unicorn. So just tell me, "Hey, I got a kid. I think he's pretty good. Here's his stats. Here's his, if he's got track, that's always helpful." The biggest way to get my attention with skill kids is, this kid runs track and he's a sub 1100. Okay, I'm listening now. And just don't oversell them. Be realistic about where they can go, and try to make it media friendly. It's not that I need the red carpet and to be bowed down to, but there are certainly schools I've been at where they've either begrudgingly let us come out and make you feel that way the entire time you're there. I mean, it's very uncomfortable, and I just don't want to be places where I'm uncomfortable, and I don't have to be, frankly. Um, and two, like, it's just a thing of, I think in life, the way you treat people matters. And just like I keep relationships with coaches because I don't know where you're going to be down the road, and I don't know, in your case, you and I kind of started talking when you were at Eaton, like a lot. And then right, I think the week I was going to come see you guys, you moved to San Marcos, and then I met Marco Regalado, and it kind of all went on from there. But like, I don't know where you're going to be in 3 years, and I don't know who's going to be at San Marcos in a year or two. What if the next Trevor Lawrence is there? What if something like that happens? So if you close those doors, I think it just really hurts you in the long run. I think the greatest currency we have in life is the way we treat one another. And so I'm very open. I would say I'm approachable. My email may not be in my Twitter bio anymore. I can't remember. I think I took it out. But my email is mikeroach247@gmail.com. If you can't get a hold of me on Twitter, shoot me an email and just send me your kids, and we would love to look at them. We love covering the state, and I want every kid in high school in the state to be able to shine their brightest. And they're not all going to be able to, but we want to help do as much as we can.
And that's fantastic. That's I think in this business, because it involves kids, I think relationships are everything. And so just to kind of piggyback off what you said, the same way that you follow every high school coach that you are able to, I'm the same way when a D3 coach follows me, when a JUCO coach follows me, we connect right away. Because again, you never know where anyone's going to be.
Right. The guy, so who's the guy? I can't remember the schools he was at, but literally he was like at Houston Baptist, UTSA, and now he's at Alabama.
Yes. Yes.
So all of a sudden, a guy that you weren't like, kids weren't given the time of day to because he was at UTSA is now at Alabama, and you just never know. And so, like, a big part of what I do, especially in the spring, and I love the springtime. It's probably, I mean, look, I love the games, and Friday nights in Texas are unbeatable, but springtime is maybe my favorite time of the year, just because it's like it's a little more laid back. I don't feel like I'm disrupting game prep for a week if I'm out there. I can go and sit in a coach's office for hours and just talk about ball. Like yesterday, I went out to Tyler Legacy, and I sat in head coach Joe Willis's office for 4 hours, and we watched a ton of film. Just here's my kids. Here's him doing this drill. We're going to use him like this. And he pulls up a TCU Baylor game, and we're going to use him in this way. And then he's teaching. And then all of a sudden we're talking, and he's teaching me things about ball that I never knew. And that's like my favorite time, bar none, just to get to talk to these coaches and, get past we know you're here just to interview this kid for 2 minutes and then you'll be out of our hair. It's building those real relationships. And what I do is I try to work my areas like a recruiter would. A college recruiter, if he's assigned the Dallas area, should be working those schools regardless of if he's recruiting kids there or not, just to keep up relationships. And I looked at it and said, why am I not doing the same thing? So I've got guys. I mean, when DJ was at Cedar Hill, Coach Sweeney, who's at DeSoto, Coach Samuels at Duncanville, Coach Trailer at South Oak Cliff. Like, I'm just going to name the whole I-20 corridor for you. I will go hit like all those schools, regardless if they got guys or not, every spring. So they see me, and the kids see me, and you never know what that freshman's going to grow into, and you never know what anything does. So I work that that's like the biggest advice I give young guys is work your area like a recruiter. Make sure that there's a reason kids come to me, and it's not because I'm incredibly hip. I think one of the things I try to do is I don't try to be a kid. I'm 36 years old. I try to be a 36-year-old, so I think that it's real for them. It doesn't feel fake, but a big reason they come to me is because they see me everywhere. And so get out, be seen, be the guy that everybody wants at your event. I think that's like I heard you guys on this podcast talking about be the coach you needed when you were a kid. And I would say, if you were a kid, especially if you played sports and you wanted to be recruited and maybe you're not, be that reporter that you wanted to look at you and look at through those eyes.
Without a doubt. And it's funny, the kids all recognize you, and maybe it's Twitter, but they say, "Oh, it's the guy with the backwards hat, the glasses, and the beard." And I'm like, "Yeah, Mike Roach. Yeah, Mike Roach. I follow him," and they see what you do to help get kids recognized all over. I think you do a tremendous job of highlighting each kid and making them feel special. And at the end of the day, I mean, whether they're top ranked recruits or just kids with a ton of potential, that makes them feel good, and it makes them work that much harder. And at the end of the day, the end goal is getting to college. And I think you're instrumental in doing that, Mike.
Well, it's a big part of this business is exposure. And it's just getting seen by the right people. And I think there's a misconception. Steve Wiltfong, who is our national director of recruiting and the biggest machine I've ever seen do this job. I mean, he is a machine. He never sleeps. I will call him at like 9 p.m. to ask him a question. And he's like, I'm putting my kids to bed, but I'm also like texting with a 5-star recruit. And I'm talking to you. And so he's the best at what he does. But in his Twitter bio, it says, I offer 0 scholarships per year. And he's right. I have nothing to do with getting kids offers. I have everything to do with getting them seen. And For instance, there's a district up here in Dallas that hasn't always been very media friendly. I'm not going to call them out, but they just haven't been very media friendly. We didn't know their kids. I discovered two of their kids who are now all Americans and have 30 offers at a 7-on-7 tournament. And their 7-on-7 team, who I have a really good relationship, said, we got to get these guys something because their schools aren't pushing them. And so they told me, they said, this one's a safety. He's this size and he runs a 10-700. And I said, that's an easy sell. And the other one is a receiver, and he's 6'1", 6'2", and is a state qualifier high jumper. Okay, great. So I pick up the phone and I call a couple schools and coaches I know and say, here's these guys, can you take a look at them? Those schools offered immediately, because the misconception there is I called and begged these guys to offer. All I did was get them in front of the right people. And even the kids came to me and said, well, you got me all my offers. No, I didn't. Your talent got you your offers. The fact that you were, look, man, if you're a safety and you're 6'1", 185 and you run a 10-700 and you are not totally just incapable of playing football, you will get offered by somebody. So that has nothing to do with me. It's just about getting them in front of the right people and getting them seen by the right people. And that's kind of the cool part about my job. I think it gets misconstrued at times, because there are times where guys, like, I'll have to go cover, like, say we have a big 7-on-7 tournament and I'll have to go cover it for our network. And my job there in that capacity is to cover the big name stars that people care about reading about. And when I leave, I will undoubtedly get calls or tweets, usually tweets at me, that I don't care about covering the under the radar kids and that I only want to see the big stars and blah, blah, blah. My job is not to discover talent. It is to report on talent. Now, I like discovering talent. It's a fun side, offshoot of my job, but that is not the part of my job. And I think that that's kind of where the biggest misconception is. But yeah, I mean, it's just about getting kids seen. And I think that there are a lot of kids that want things right now. They want everything everybody has right now. And to be honest, if you're not a freak athlete, like I'll go back to Evan Stewart, and I mention Evan a lot because he and I are close, and he's a big name recruit, and I feel like I've been there for the whole thing. Evan had nothing at this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
We were in quarantine. He had never been to I think he'd been like one camp. He's never been on a college visit in his life. He's a 5-star recruit. He's never been on a college visit in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And his film had not changed from the previous fall, but our friend Coach O sent me it and said, you should see this kid's track times. And he was a 10-7 500. He was a 21:02 200. He long jumped like 23 feet and triple jumped like 44.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's easy. And you know what? That got me to look at the film. And then the film says, okay, it matches to what the athleticism matches to what he's doing on the field. And then when you start putting that in front of the right people, especially in a year of COVID where they weren't able to go out and stand on sidelines and look at these kids and see kids like that, he exploded. And now he's the most pursued wide receiver in the country. It's just about being seen. And I think the kids that want what Evan has, it's not necessarily that Evan went crazy at camps and worked for it in that way, but Evan made sure that the track numbers were legit. The film was legit. The grades were legit. That's the biggest thing. I mean, I can't tell you. I went to a school last week and they gave me the prospect sheet, and this prospect sheet had GPAs on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at this kid and I'm like, this kid is awesome. How has nobody looked? And I looked down, it says 1.9. And I almost just folded it up and threw it away. Like, yep. I just we can't do anything with that. You guys gotta, if any of the kids are listening, you gotta have the grades. And so, yeah, I think it's just, it's getting seen by the right people, but it's doing the right things to put yourself in that position. I think it's following advice from people who know the game. Guys like yourself, like DJ Mann, Coach O knows more about recruiting than anybody I know. I mean, he'll give a lot of advice on go to this camp, don't go to that camp. There are a lot of swindles out there. There are a lot of people that are looking to make money off the kids and just get as many in the gate as they can. They don't care if they get 2 or 3 reps at the whole camp. And there's times that people drive across the state, and it's a big state. There's guys driving from Midland to Houston, which is a haul, to go get 3 reps at a camp. And it's like, what are we doing here? So follow the right people, follow the right advice. do the work, really.
That's it. That's it. And gosh, you hit on so much right there, Mike. I just have to, reiterate, follow the right advice from the right people. Uh, Again, with what you said, there's so many people who will say track doesn't matter. You don't have to do that. Well, it helps. It sure
Uh,
helps.
I will tell you this. I will tell you this. Track absolutely matters, especially for skill kids. If you're a skill kid and you're not at least, I don't care if you're running the open 100 in the meet, you need to be in that workout because you get things like fixing form. You can unlock so much potential in yourself that you didn't know you had. I have this extra speed that I didn't know I had because I was running wrong,
Mhm.
things like that. And so I, I was at school last week and there's a kid I love who's a freshman and he's going to be big time, but they told me he doesn't run varsity track and he wanted to play 7-on-7, didn't run varsity track, and I bullied him for like an hour after practice. I was just like, and I'll tell everybody this: the fastest path to 5 stars, and it's not the only thing that happens, but if you run a sub 1100, you will catch our attention, and if the film matches, you will get there. Because it's one thing to say, I think that guy's fast. It's another thing to say that guy's 10-7 fast. We know that it's been verified on a track, or he's 4-4 at a combine, or whatever the case may be. And there's guys out there who duck times because they know they're not going to time well. And I get it. You've got to kind of protect your investment the best you can. You don't want to go put a bad time down necessarily. But we also notice that sort of thing. And so I always tell people, in my experience, fast guys love proving how fast they are. You go talk to Evan Stewart, you go talk to Deuce Harmon from last year who signed with A&M, which you know well from Geyer. Ask those dudes, hey, you want to race that guy over there? They'll line it up anywhere. Evan Stewart will run Usain Bolt if he showed up tomorrow. He'd run him barefoot in a parking lot if he had to. Those guys love proving how fast they are. And so if you're hiding from something, it tells me you don't either want to compete or you're hiding that you're not very fast. I've never seen like a truly fast guy I know turn down an opportunity to race. I mean, they it's what they live for. So track absolutely matters, and multi-sports matter. Like, we want to see you compete in other things. We want to see you be a great teammate in other things. I mean, I think that sports has gotten to a point where it's so singularly focused on, especially like quarterbacks and stuff. It's like, our whole life is going to be about going to practice, coming home, private training, and working this. And it's like, go look at the dudes who are doing it at the highest level. Pat Mahomes was a dual sport athlete, um, Tom Brady was a dual sport athlete. Like,
Mhm.
those guys it didn't hurt their development. In fact, I would say that a guy like Pat Mahomes doesn't get drafted if he doesn't, like where he did, if he doesn't have the baseball skill set to kind of make some of the throws he's able to make. And so all that stuff matters, man. Like, I can't sit here and openly endorse every high school coach in the state, because there are some that just don't care about the kids. And
Mhm.
it's like any large group of people. There's always some that you just, they're kind of useless. But for the most part, man, listen to your coaches. They're looking out for the best for you. There's guys out here working like you. The thing that always amazes me about high school recruiting coordinators, you guys don't get paid any extra to be a high school recruiting coordinator. You
Right.
don't get any extra stipend, and you're dealing with all the headaches. You have to field every call from a coach. And if one, I assume, well, I don't assume, I've been told, but like, I assume for you as well,
Mhm.
if one kid on your team gets offered, I'm sure 10 parents are calling you going, where's the offer for my kid? You got to deal with
Yes.
all that. And you got your own problems. You got a mortgage. You got all these things to do. And you don't get paid any extra for it. You're doing it because you love the kids. You want to see them get somewhere. In a case like DJ, was when he was at Cedar Hill, not only was he doing recruiting coordinating for his team, he was running the whole recruiting operation for every athletic sport on campus. So
Mhm.
making sure that they were all set up for eligibility, that they had their NLIs, all that sort of thing, not
Mhm.
getting paid one extra dime for it. And
Mhm.
so guys like that who are putting in these hours doing it, man, listen to them. They care enough that they can punch out at 5 if they wanted to and go home and not have to think about it at all, but they care enough to do it.
That's right. That's right, Mike. Yeah, it never stops. That's one thing that DJ and I always joke about. He's like, man, what time you get off last night? I said, we never get off.
Yeah.
All we do is work.
I
And
mean,
it's
coach,
a
if if Nick Saban calls you at 11:30 p.m. and you're laying in bed with your girl watching a movie or something, we got to pause the movie.
Yes, I'm taking that call. I am
Yeah.
taking
And,
that
and,
call.
and on the same token, if a coach from Oklahoma Baptist calls you at 11:30, not just
Yep.
Nick Saban, you're taking that call.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. If Daniel Eden calls me from Oklahoma Baptist, I'm taking his
there we
call
go. Got the
100%.
name. I knew
That's
you
right.
had the
Drop his
name.
name real quick. Good coach, by the way. Yes. Well, Mike, I got one more question for you. You've just shared so much information that's going to help so many people. This is the last thing. Uh, Everyone thinks that they are an early offer guy. We see these 23s getting offers already, these 24s getting offers. How do you determine who's going to reach that potential of that 5-star or 4-star guy that deserves the early offer?
I'm going to split this question into two answers, and we may
Mhm.
have to do an episode two because I
Yeah.
love the organic nature of this conversation because it doesn't feel so rigid, and I can just kind of wander, and I love wandering.
Yes. Yes.
I'll say this, anytime you want me back, I'm down to come on. But
Bet.
let's talk about offers first.
Mhm.
Offers are an illusion. They are real in some cases, and they're not in others. And they are, depending on the situation, they're real on Monday and not on Tuesday. They are an offer, especially an early one in most cases, is just reserving your spot in line. It's reserving that school's spot in line to be able to recruit that kid down the road. And so they can say, we offered early. We've wanted you. Now they may offer you early and not talk to you for a year.
Mhm.
And if you called and committed, they would tell you, no, we need you to wait. So know what's a real offer and what's not. Know which schools are interested in you and which aren't. Um, Obviously there's guys that pop early. There's a lot of things. Again, I'm going to go back to track, and it's beating a dead drum. But if you're running sub 11s and you're a freshman or sophomore, or even if you're running 11-1, 11-2, 11 flat, I've got an eye on you because I know that you're going to get faster as you grow in that strength program at that school, especially if you're in the strength program under John Walsh, you're probably going to get a lot faster. So I'm always got my eye on that. It's just, I don't know that I can pinpoint one thing. It's mainly like, you see an offensive lineman who's, as a freshman, 6'4", and he may be 220, but you see the frame, you see what he can be, and you get an idea of how athletic he is. Here's an example. So there's a kid at Keller High School named Trey Griffiths. He's a 2024 defensive end. And he, I got to pull this up because I don't want to get the numbers wrong. But I went out to Keller because I got a buddy on that staff, and he's been telling me about him. And so I go out there and I meet the kid, and he's a great looking kid. I mean, he's tall, he's got a great frame, but I haven't ever really seen him do anything athletic. I haven't seen him, really work out in football or anything like that. I cannot find the message. Anyways, I get out there and they tell me, well, he benches this, he power cleaned this the other day, and he did his first triple jump, and it was like 43 something ever. First time he ever triple jumped.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, well, that's something. And then, so that's just ticket in my mind. Like, that's a kid. Okay, put him in a file. Just kind of keep an eye on him, follow up down the road, see how things are going. And he may never develop into a football player. I don't know. He may just be a really good triple jumper. My gut tells me if he's not completely like uh, incompetent at playing football, he's probably going to be pretty good with his athletic profile and his size already. But it's kind of just things like that. It's little things, and I lean a lot on the coaches because especially if I got a coach I can trust not to blow smoke. Hey, what do you really think he is? And I'll ask coaches all the time, legitimately, what do you think his ceiling is in college? And a good one will tell you he's low FCS or he's low G5 or something like that.
Mhm.
They'll be realistic with you. What's funny is I had a coach once tell me at a school, I got and it wasn't a school that's like that they don't make it to AT&T very often.
Okay.
But he's like, I got 18 Power 5 dudes on my team, and I'm like, you just don't. There's no way you do, or you'd be running the state. Like, Duncanville is who they are. and their prospect sheet is probably 10 or 11 deep of Power 5 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Duncanville. That's 10 or 11 of legitimate, can play Power 5 football. North Shore's up there. You know, in certain years, there's a couple other schools that'll mix in there. Geyer was always a talented factory. Ryan, of course, is crazy talented. But if you're telling me you have 18 Power 5 guys on your team, you better be winning every game by 70.
Yes.
I can't buy it. And so like when it starts off that way, it's hard to believe anything else they tell you from there. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I lean on coaches a lot. I lean on guys I know. Like I know what my strengths and weaknesses are as an evaluator. I think that I personally think I evaluate DBs better than I evaluate anything. I've just always had a kind of an eye for DBs. So I like, you know, when I look at a DB, I have my own thoughts, but I'll also call Kyle Ward at SOC, who's you know, a master at coaching DBs and defense, and say, what do you think of this kid? And, you know, Kyle loves to just watch film in his off time. So he'll tell me, or I'll call Coach Flight, one of the best trainers in the state, and say, what do you think of this kid?
No
I
doubt.
know that my biggest weakness is offensive line. I struggle with evaluating offensive line. And I think that it's probably the hardest position to evaluate for colleges because there's so much growth in it, right? You see a kid as a sophomore, it's so different what he looks like as a senior. But in that case, you know, I'll call Coach O and I'll say, what do you think about this guy? It's asking the right questions. I've the axiom in my life I live by is like, just always ask questions, keep questioning everything. There's never enough information for me. There's never like, okay, I've had too much information, because these are teenagers and they're always growing and they're always changing. And what you see in spring, and you go away for a summer and come back in the fall, it's completely different. I recall I saw Jaquindon Jackson when he was a sophomore at Duncanville. And I remember leaving and I called somebody and I said, yeah, I don't think he's a quarterback at the next level. He's probably a slot receiver, because he was kind of skinny. He was tall but skinny. And I said, he's probably a slot receiver. And literally, this was November. Next March or April, I'm at an Under Armour camp and he walks by me. And I look at him and I go, man, that kid looks familiar, but he's 3 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier. And I'm like, that kid looks familiar, and it's killing me. It's bugging me. And I pick up the roster and look at his number, and I'm like, that's Jaquindon Jackson. You know, he had kind of morphed from his sophomore year into what we saw as a junior and senior at Duncanville in the span of 4 or 5 months. So never, you know, I don't ever try to, I think there is a thing in our business where it's like, we market rankings and it's what we do to an extent, and it's a good thing. But I think there are times where we're a little too early to do things like that. It's hard to rank sophomores, you know, it really is. Especially if they're coming off just 1 year playing ball. You try to look for flashes, you try to look for, you know, what really sticks out. But if you ever go look at the initial sophomore rankings versus how they finish as seniors, it's incredibly different, because outside of 3 or 4 guys in every state that, you know, as a sophomore, all right, that guy's a dude. Like, you know, it's just hard to, it's really hard to forecast. So I hope I answered your question. I
You
think I
did,
took
yeah.
the long way around.
No, you backed it up with some really, really, really good context information too. So that I can apply with what you said there. Now, I said last question, but you just have my mind working. So I have one more before I let you go, Mike. With this one, it is. Uh, we always say this. We always say that the level of exposure can lead to your level of success, because you have to get out there to be seen. In Central Texas, I've noticed that there was very little exposure for these kids out here. Uh, how can we get the media that does all the big coverage for, like you do for Horns 24/7? How can we get you guys down to the Central Texas area?
Food. If you feed
All
us, we'll
right,
come. I mean, no, I'm
all
just kidding.
right.
I'm just kidding. You know, I think that's one of the things O's figured out with his camps is, you know, especially when he does them with Brandon Tucker at Trench Warfare, they'll
Mhm.
cater in Hutchins Barbecue. And O
There you
could tell
go.
me it's a bunch of 7th grade kids that you'll never cover, but
Mhm.
he's like, but I got Hutchins and I'll show up. So, you know, it's just kind of the way things are, is that the glut of media in this state lives in Dallas,
Mhm.
and we cover our area. And I would say that I actually had this, it was an argument I kind of had with another media guy the other day is, it's he tweeted it and I kind of argued with him publicly, and it wasn't like a bad argument. It was weird discussing it back and forth. So I'll say his name. It's CJ Vogel, who covers Texas for the Football Brainiacs. He does a great job, but
Mm-hmm.
he's an Austin guy. And he was saying, Austin needs to get its love for the receivers they produced. They're all top 30 in the country. And I'm like, well, then they got their love. I mean, we named
Yeah.
them top 30 in the country. So they got their love. The problem is that the Central Texas doesn't buy like per cat, like depth wise produce the same numbers as the larger metro areas Dallas and Houston does. It's the same thing for East Texas. There are
Mm-hmm.
years where East Texas will have 10 dudes who are freak shows, but East Texas by and large doesn't produce the same amount of depth. And so, I think we kind of go to where the talent is.
Mm-hmm.
But large part of it is we live in Dallas. So it's a lot easier for me to cover Dallas schools. Drive I got to drive 3 hours to come see Central Texas, which isn't a problem. And, you and I talked this morning. I told you I'll definitely get you guys on the schedule for spring, and we'll make a trip down there. And, the big part of that is, like I was talking about earlier, it's relationships. Like there's, um, I'm probably going to go at some point this year to Brookshire Royal High School,
Mm-hmm.
because Deatis Regans is a friend of mine and he's the head coach there now. And there is nobody there for me to cover recruiting wise, but I've got a relationship with him. Joseph Sam, who was a really good friend of mine,
Yeah.
just got the Bowie job, and Bowie has always been like an open door program to me, even under Danny DeArmond when he was there. And so I called Sam and I said, let me know the first day you're there and I'll be there to
Mm-hmm.
cover your kids. Now, they got a 5-star offensive lineman. We care about him a lot. But
Yes.
if they weren't, I'd have been in the door anyways, because I want to show love to the people who have helped me and supported me. Shadow Creek, I got great relationships with Shadow Creek.
Mm-hmm.
They've been a talent producer for years, a little down this year by their standards. They still got some kids that can go. But when I get to Houston, I will go by Shadow Creek because those relationships. So I think that's really the big thing, is build those relationships, and guys that want to come. I love going and just hanging out with dudes I know and being able to sit around and talk. The staff at McKinney sticks out. Coach Shavers over there has
Mm-hmm.
always been really gracious to me. He fed me when I came out earlier in the spring, got me Chick-fil-A, and we sat in his office and talked ball for a few hours. So I think like that's probably the biggest thing, is just build the relationship, and we'll come. Like I said, I wish I could have made it to the camp O did down there last week. I heard it was a really great turnout.
Absolutely.
I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't have it in the cards, but I'm going to make a Central Texas swing in spring, and it's easier for me because I live pretty south down 35, and I live in Crowley.
Mm-hmm.
So, Waco to me is like 45, 50 minutes, and then I could be in Austin in 2:15, which means I could be at San Marcos not that far after that. So
Mm-hmm.
I will make it down there. I think just incorporate it and make it. I'm not going to say you guys need to roll out the red carpet for any of us, but make it inviting in some way. I always hate, like I said, I've been to schools, and I've been to schools in the past couple of weeks where it's like you just feel uncomfortable the whole time you're there, and it's
Mm-hmm.
nobody talks to you, and it's come take pictures of our kids, tweet about them, and leave. Like that's the whole deal. So
Yeah.
make it comfortable for us.
No doubt. And then I have my notes right here. I'm jotting down that I will be
Mhm.
making sure you get some Kent Black's barbecue. So I got you.
Okay, there we
Yeah,
go.
you're taken
There we
care
go.
of.
Wait, there was a place. Where did I have in San Marcos? Last time I did a spring trip. Here's the other thing. I'm so out of spring shape
Hmm.
because we didn't have spring last year. So like I'm doing all these things now, and I'm having a hard time because I'm like, man, I just feel like I haven't done this in forever. I haven't done the
Hmm.
spring thing in forever, and I haven't because we didn't have spring last year. And
Right.
so like I didn't get into this line of work to wake up early. I'll tell you that. Like one of the perks of it is that I can work late at night and then sleep in the morning, and I work
Yeah.
from home and all those sorts of things. But like this morning, I went out to Wiley East. Wiley East new head coach is Marcus Gold, who went to high school with me, and Jay Rose is their recruiting coordinator.
My
Jay
guy. Yeah.
Jay grew up in the same town I did. My dad went to high school with his dad, so um, I'm proud of I'm proud to be from Irving, Texas. And so anytime I see Irving kids succeed, I want to help. And so when Jay said, will you please come out? I was like, absolutely. But Wiley East is an hour and 20-minute drive from my house. And they were like, we start at 8. So I'm looking at the clock going, all right. And it was a tough drive across the Metroplex in morning traffic this morning. But, I reminded myself, like, you're just driving to a football field to go watch some things, and then you're going to go home and like do whatever you want. So
Right.
I just got to get myself back in that spring shape a little bit. It's conditioning for us as well. So
Hmm.
I am excited, man. It's exciting to see spring ball once again.
Absolutely. And with this dead period, I think fingers crossed officially over June 1st. I'm excited for kids to get back on campus for visits and go to college camp. So it's going to be an exciting time here. We're finally shaking the spring break that never ended. So it
Yeah,
feels good.
it was insane, man. I just kind of reminded myself of that today. I was like, dude, last year you were like sitting inside, crawling up the walls, to go see something, to see some football, and like don't complain about anything this year because man, that's really like what the biggest thing in the last year has been is like how your parents always told you like there's others less fortunate than you are there. Don't take this for granted. It could be taken away from you. And you always kind of, okay, whatever. But like last year, I think we all kind of saw it.
Hmm.
And like visits, I'm already planning, like I'll be in Austin for this visit weekend or whatever. And to make sure I'm covering it. And I don't love driving to Austin for a day trip and turning right back around and coming home after covering visits, but it's like, you haven't had visits in a year and a half. Like, just be thankful they're there. Like,
That's
just go.
right.
It's good. It's good for work. Like, it's just good for the mentals, all those sorts of things. So, yeah, we will definitely get down to San Marcos. Food or no food, I will definitely be there.
All right. Well, I got you. I'm a man of my words. I got you. I guess the last thing, Mike, if you would just please drop your socials, your contact information, so everybody can read the articles that you put out and just get in touch with you if they need to.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Mike Roach 247. That's really the only place I do a lot of stuff. Earlier I talked about I shudder that recruiting's going towards Instagram because I got off of Facebook because Facebook is mainly a platform that a lot of the backwards thinking members of my family make me irrationally angry by reading it, and I just had to take it out of my life so that I wasn't constantly just fighting with my family members. And so I kind of moved that part of my life to Instagram. And like, if you want to see pictures of me, they'll be on Instagram, or like pictures of me and the wife, or whatever we're doing. And so I don't really, and what I may do is make a personal one and a work one, but like I don't really want to use Instagram for that. And I've had like recruits try to follow me on there, and I'm just like, I don't want to get it. I kind of want to keep this part of my life private. So,
Hmm.
so Micros247 on Twitter is the best place to find me. And it's not always football. I make a lot of jokes. Sometimes they're funny. I watch a lot of hockey. I'm a huge hockey fan. So like if the Stars are playing, I'm tweeting about it. So it's not
Yeah.
always. There are guys who I think have signed up for football and have caught me during a Stars playoff run, especially last year when they were in the Cup. And it's just that's all you're getting for nights. I'm logging off and we're gonna watch hockey. So yeah, that's the best place to find me. I would say, I also have a podcast. It's called The State of Recruiting, and you can find that anywhere you find your podcasts. We're especially on iTunes is probably the best place to find us. And that's basically it's Texas recruiting centric. I do that with Nick Harris, who works with me as another guy who just grinds all over the state. And we kind of, we have the same type of philosophy about doing the job. Nick is, Nick is a young, hungry kid who like the other day, he called me at like 6 a.m. and I was like, "What are you doing, Nick?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm 3 hours into a trip to El Paso. I'm gonna go see this kid in El Paso." And
Wow.
thank God, I don't want to drive to El Paso. So, so Nick kills it doing his job as well. Nick Harris 247 on Twitter, and
Hmm.
then what you get on Twitter, what you get on the podcast. I always call those the nuggets. If you want the full meal, if you're a fan of Texas recruiting, subscribe to Horns 24/7. That's the best place you find us. It's horns247.com or texas.247sports.com.
That's it. That's it. Well, Mike, I appreciate this is probably one of the better podcasts I've ever done just because of the organic nature. We vibe, maybe it's the beer gang, I don't know,
Yeah.
but we we got a good conversation going. So I really appreciate that. If and like you alluded to, I think a part two is coming because I have a whole
Yeah.
nother list of questions that are
I
ready to
love
go.
these kinds of conversations. Like I really do because I love discussing why I do my job. A lot of times guys will get me on shows and it's just not the nature of your show. So it's why you haven't done it, but it's a lot of tell us the information. What is this kid thinking? What is that kid thinking? And I love talking about just the state of things in general and why I do my job and what I think about what's going on in recruiting right now, what I think about high school football versus 7-on-7. And there's a million things we can get into and really, mix it up. So I'm down to come on whenever you want. And man, I gotta, like, for you, I've mentioned DJ 100 times on this show. I'm sure his ears are red, or ears are burning. For you, for him, for all the guys in the state who are doing it, grinding for your kids, and really, really out there. And I know you guys go through a lot. And man, I can't thank you enough for what you do, because the exposure y'all do, as hard as you work for your kids, that's what makes me want to work hard for your kids. When I see a guy like you, doing everything he can to get them promoted, I got to get to Geyer. Mike Gallegos over there is working his butt off, promoting their kids. And I don't know him. He tags me and everything. I need to reach out to him and just say, like, hey, can I get out there? That guy is working his butt off promoting those kids. And so when I see guys like that, it makes me want to work harder and make sure that we're not, missing anything. And that, maybe there are times where I'm tired and I could just skip it and do something, but it's like, no, go do it. You never know whose life you might be able to help. So, man, thank you for what you do. And this podcast is a must listen for me, just because the guests you have on, it's just such a wealth of knowledge. It's great personal development for myself. I develop along with coaches the same way. Like we're just two sides of of the same coin, So, whatever you guys are doing, I'm trying to counteract and make sure I'm in line with you guys. So thank you for what you do.
Absolutely. I appreciate that greatly, man. This again has been the iCoach podcast. Be on the lookout for part 2 coming with Mike Roach in the next month or so. We'll get together and make that work.
All right. I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Have a great one.
You too.